Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that, and I thank my colleagues for allowing me to go next, as I have a conflict later in the day. So thanks very much to all of you for your help. Congressman Watt, I've got three quick questions, really. I want to start with a quote that is attributed to you from a House Financial Services Committee hearing. And in it you said, in September of 2003, you said, quote, "Private enterprises really have not done very well in achieving things other than making money. Most of them do not really give much of a, expletive deleted, about poor people and whether they have housing or not, and it seems to me that an overemphasis in that direction can only make matters worse." I guess my question is that still your view about the private sector with respect to the mortgage markets? And if so, how could we be confident that you would help lead a transition to a mortgage finance model that would rely more on the private sector?
Thank you for the question, Senator Toomey, and thank you also for meeting with me in advance of the hearing, leading up to the hearing. We were observing a lot of very negative things that were going on in the housing industry at that time, some of which I alluded to in answering Chairman Johnson's questions. Loans were being made to people based on incentives for profit rather than on their ability to repay. There were substantial incentives built into the system that were negative incentives, and they were taking advantage of them, both in the private sector, and Fannie and Freddie also got into the act, one foot in the public sector and one foot in the private sector. So there are circumstances in which the profit motive overtakes anything else, responsibility. And I still believe that, but I think if you look at my record, you will know that I have worked in the private sector responsibly. I've worked with the private sector responsibly, and I believe that the private sector is critical to our economy, and I'm hoping that we can incentivize as much of this business going back into the private sector as the private sector will assume, as quickly as it will assume it.
I've got another question here. With respect to the HAMP PRA program, are you prepared to commit now that you will not implement principal reductions on mortgages?
Well, as I told you previously, I can tell you what the principles will be if I am asked to look at that again, and I suspect I will be asked to look at it again because some people still think it's a relevant question, despite the fact that housing prices have gone up and there are fewer and fewer people underwater at this point than they have been. But I would start, as I would with any issue that has been decided already by FHFA, I would start by studying carefully how that decision was reached, what it was based on, and then I would build on that new information. I think the information on which that decision was made is a year and a half old now. And then I would make a responsible decision based on that.
The concern is that the information was quite recent, but available when you signed a letter in December urging exactly this principal reduction, despite the fact that the FHFA analysis was that this was not a good idea. Wasn't a good idea for the enterprises, wasn't a good idea for the taxpayers, and I don't think it's a good idea for mortgage credit availability generally. And so the concern is that based on the data then and the analysis then that suggested that this was a bad idea, you nevertheless recommended it. So that's why I'm wondering how we should view this now.
First of all, there was conflicting data out there. Obviously, FHFA had made a decision that that reached one conclusion, but there was conflicting data. Second of all, you got to understand that I was a member of Congress representing my constituents, many of whom were underwater, and advocating for relief for them. You should have no doubt that I will be a strong and aggressive and advocate for the taxpayers in this role, because I view them as my constituents in this role, not the constituents that I represented before.
Mr. Chairman, do I have time for one more quick follow-up? It's very quick.
Make it quick.
Very quick, thank you. You, no doubt, have seen that a number of municipalities are actively considering employing eminent domain to purchase underwater mortgages. Do you support that? And if you do not support that, would you make it the policy of Fannie and Freddie not to make mortgage financing available within the boundaries of municipalities exercising that?
Well, I've been a long advocate for acknowledging the prerogatives that state governments have in our federal system. We can't make every decision, and eminent domain is essentially a state and local issue. But I would insist that any decision not put local governments in front of the of our taxpayers, and that if a decision was being made, it was being made for strictly public reasons, and I think that would be the analysis I would make.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The committee now stands in recess.